4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's executive meeting. Whether you're watching at home, watching back afterwards, you're an officer or councillor on the committee, or one of our public participants today, you're all very welcome. We've got a long meeting ahead with a number of important reports. So I just wanted to warn those watching and also the officers that we might take a break at about 90 minutes into the meeting, depending on how I think we're going. So just to warn you all that might happen. Our first agenda item is declarations of interest. So if I could ask any colleagues if they wish to declare any interest not already in their register of interests, and I will go to Councillor Craghill first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to declare an interest on agenda item 7, Make It York, as a director of Make It York, and I won't participate in that agenda item. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Cuthbertson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare an interest, a personal interest, as a, pardon me, a non-exec director and chairman of the board of City of York Trading Limited. I won't take part in the discussion and I won't be in the vote either.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Smalley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Similar to Councillor Craghill, as a director of Make It York, I have an interest in item 7, and so we'll leave the meeting at that stage.
Thank you very much. I cannot see any further indications of declarations to declare, so thank you very much for those ones. And then that takes us through to agenda item 2, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. So the minutes are on pages 1 to 6. There is, I know, an amendment to the minutes before we consider them, so I'll go to Councillor de Gorne first.
Yes, it's just, it should note in relation to item 86, which was about the York Business Improvement District renewal ballot, that Councillor Waller and myself as directors declared an interest and didn't take part in that item on the agenda, so we weren't present in the meeting for that item.
Indeed.
Thank you very much for that, which I can see is an amendment supported by Councillor Waller. So I'll just check with Janie Berry as the monitoring officer. That's an appropriate amendment to make.
Yes, that is, Chair. Yes.
Thank you very much. Can't see any other indications. So with that amendment that has just been suggested, could I then see all of those in favour of accepting the amended minutes? Thank you very much. That's a clear majority in favour of that. That then moves us on to item 3, which is public participation. And we've got 7 registered public participants today. Each public participant has 3 minutes to speak to us on the topic that they've registered to speak on. And as I said at the start, all are very welcome to the meeting. So without further ado, our first public participant is Joan Colcannon, who is here as the Director of External Relations of the University of York, and to talk on agenda item 7, which is the renewal of the contract with Make It York. Joan, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm a board member of Make It York, so I've been closely involved in the discussions about the working arrangements between Make It York and CYC, and these discussions have been frank and incredibly constructive and collaborative. The tenor of the discussions really has focused on how we can all work together for the benefit of the city going forward, and I think that really goes to the heart of our discussions. What's the role of a highly functioning destination management organisation such as Make It York as part of an integrated ecosystem of activity that can drive inclusive economic growth? How do we need to work together to shape the city's response to and recovery from COVID-19? I believe there's a really exciting opportunity for us to shape the city's response going forward in terms of that recovery. And sorry, I'm just struggling with technology. I believe And really what we want to do is to develop new ways of working that position York as a world-class city to live, work, study and invest in. The world is obviously changing very rapidly. The centre of gravity is shifting glacially, it must be said, away from London as the dominant economic powerhouse. And cities like York are uniquely positioned to take advantage of that shift. CYC is already framing a really great response in respect of a reboot of its economic strategy. And I think Make It York will have a major role to play in supporting the delivery of that strategy. The new agreement will frame how we can work together to harness our different skills, experiences and networks towards a common goal. Key aspects, I think, will include how we create a robust, sustainable, innovative and inclusive economy that can support all of our residents. How can we create and promote a fantastic cultural offering that expands the understanding and engagement with our city's unique and beautiful environment and our unique history? And I use that word unique deliberately because no one else has York's history. No one else can emulate or replicate our built environment. So these are the key elements that a destination marketing organisation can promote in pursuit of that shared goal to drive inclusive prosperity, and even more importantly, a sense of well-being and pride in our city. We've been looking at a range of cities that have successful DMOs that help support and drive economic and cultural ambition and investment. Cities like Copenhagen, Christchurch, New Zealand have established really interesting models of cooperation that I think could be a really interesting blueprint for how we work together in the future. There is, in my view, a clear benefit of having arm's length bodies to help deliver a city's goals. This has been noted in recent work by the Institute for Government. It's notable also that most recent COVID recovery financial disbursements overseen by Visit England and DCMS have gone to commercial DMOs because it's a recognisable conduit and government and funders recognise their validity. So finally, I think York is a city that is incredibly resilient. We need to work together productively and collaboratively so that we can achieve the optimal results for the city that we all want. And I really, I'm very excited about the potential future working relationship between Make It York and City of York Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, and I know they'll get taken into account when we consider agenda item 7. Our second public speaker today is Janice Gray, a local resident who is also registered to speak on the agenda item about Make It York, and you have your 3 minutes. I can see that you've just come off mute, Janice. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Great. You've got your 3 minutes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. We are all had a completely difficult and different year last year, and ongoing. Make It York is no exception. But I was told that a high level of costs incurred in dismantling the current arrangements, and also if it doesn't remain a going concern, the consequences will be severe and cause damage to the long-term development and management of York's vital tourism economy. It provides key services relating to business support and city centre management. These are parts of what York Business Improvement District's York BID does as well, and their key account management service. So I don't know quite why they can't combine together. Make It York supports a number of aims of the council plan that are already covered by each other, like City of York Trading and YPO, and overlap others. Safe Communities, Safer York Partnerships have dealt with that for many years. Work with schools, the YPO procurement, help out with all that as well. And the City of York Council is also a joint owner of YPO. And it includes mutual companies like the Museums Trust and CAB. Make It York could perhaps reduce their outgoings, sharing office space, or working with York BID and My City Centre. If a contract is renewed, there needs to be a tightening up and routine scrutiny, perhaps by the Audit Commission or some such. And I think it should the contract be renewed annually if it goes ahead. Being a tech-owl company means Make It York don't need to tender, Also, any contracts from CYC must be checked thoroughly. I've had an email from Councillor Smalley this evening that says this is not a done deal. Well, if it isn't, then why was 55,000 given to Welcome to Yorkshire to help boost Make It York? There is also going to be a consultation with stakeholders, i.e. certain councillors and local residents. I presume they are stakeholders as well. So I'd be interested to know, and obviously there'll be another meeting about this next month. So hopefully I'll be informed about that as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, which will get taken into account when we consider agenda item 7. Our third,
all right.
Thank you. Our third public speaker today is Councillor Claire Douglas, as a CYC councillor on the same agenda item, and you have 3 minutes, Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here again speaking about Make It York, agenda item 7. This time about my fears for how this contract renewal process and the client, CYC, vendor, Make It York relationship is playing out in front of our eyes. Make It York are contracted, i.e. paid by its 100% owner CYC to carry out functions covering economic growth, inward investment, tourism, markets and events, all tremendously important to York's economic health and the recovery of our city from the COVID-19 pandemic. The long-term health of our city depends upon you, the executive and sole shareholder in Make It York, getting the delivery of these functions right. Having reviewed the contents of this report, I have real concerns that our city, taxpayers and council won't be getting best value for the £2 million commitment they've been told they're making to Make It York. This isn't acceptable when this year our council is making budget cuts totalling £7.9 million. I fear that the leader of the council and executive members are running scared of assertions that from Make It York that this contract renewal process and review of governance is a baseless attack stemming from a personal and general dislike of Make It York. I fear that by maintaining the status quo with this contract, the council and administration will still not be exerting the required control over Make It York to fulfil TCAL legislation requirements. I fear that the day-to-day control level needed to meet TCAL requirements won't be met while Make It York continues to fight with everything they have to stop a realignment of the relationship between the organisations to increase transparency, oversight and accountability. I fear the board of Make It York continues to be deaf to the city's business community around what support and services they need in order to recover from the pandemic. How, therefore, can it be acting in the best interest of our city and delivering best value for money at a time when this is needed more than ever? And I fear that the administration is failing to take important and decisive action to put the relationship between Make It York and the council right, because they don't want to upset senior figures at Make It York, one of whom is publicly documented as a Liberal Democrat Party supporter. You, the executive, the only people who can allay my fears echoed around the city from businesses, residents and organisations. Now is the time for you to act, to make sure our city gets the very most out of this contract, and not to will be a dereliction of your duty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Douglas, for your comments that I know will get taken into account in agenda item 7. Obviously, you did make reference there to some allegations regards a senior member of Make It York, which I'll ask Janie to follow up with you, because obviously that's quite an important issue rather than just a side swipe remark. But thank you very much for your comments about the contract overall. We will now move on to our fourth public speaker, who is Andrew Lowson, who's speaking as the Executive Director of York Bid, and is here to speak regards to Make It York. Andrew, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me, Chair?
I can, yes.
Lovely, thank you. Yep, Since York Bid was established in 2016, it has always strived to have close relations with Make It York. Before I took my position as Exec Director, the Bid Board was formed with two Make It York board directors in the spirit of this partnership. As you know, the Bid is about to finish its own 5-year term, and during that time, I'm pleased to say that we've done much collaboration with Make It York. The Make It York Christmas markets, combined with the Bid's lead on Christmas lights, have seen York win many awards and accolades for its general Christmas experience. The Bid has been a major financer and active collaborator with Make It York on projects such as Bloom and the York Ice Trail. And more recently, I've worked closely with Alex Green on the concept of setting up sector groups to get regular feedback from the business community during the COVID crisis. The City York Council, FSB and Chambers all supported, co-chaired this exercise, a great example of wider partner working and also avoiding duplication. These are examples of joint ambitions, all to improve the city. I've seen bids and DMOs in other cities forge their own paths and sometimes compete with each other. In the early years of the Bid and Make It York, both Steve Brown, the previous MD, and myself agreed that we should never put ourselves in that situation, as the only loser would be the City of York. Now is not the time to lose a function that has a remit to support the city's businesses. If you go back a decade in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, many cities actually lost their DMOs. And the learning from that, when I speak to them, is that once they're gone, they do not come back. It's a loss. And if we're to look at one positive from the current situation, there should be a buoyant domestic tourism market. And therefore, it's essential that Visit York exists to capitalise upon that. In regard to an investment, the fact that York has many exciting developments in the pipeline again shows that there's a need for this function. It doesn't need to be complicated, rather a simple message that both investors and York businesses can understand. And it should also be mindful and inclusive of all our vibrant sectors. And on this point of simplicity and communication, I do think the business community would welcome a visible agreement between the City of York Council and Make It York that will help provide clarity on certain aims, something that was perhaps not as clear when Make It York was first established. For example, in my 5 years working in the city, I've seen constant debates regarding Make It York's role in generating commercial income in the city centre and questions on how much this return goes to City Council. And USLA needs to demonstrate how any commercial return is invested back into the city, whether that is by Make It York or the City Council. Providing this clarity to partners will allow the city to move forward and dispel this misinformation that quite often clouds this area. So to summarise, if the Bid itself gets voted back in the next month and is able to start work on its new 5-year business plan, ensuring that it dovetails with a new Make It York SLA will be crucial for the good of the city. So I support the recommendations today and also continued consultation.
Thank you very much for your comments, which as previously will get taken into account when we consider agenda item 7. Our fifth public speaker today is David Horn, who's here as the Managing Director of LNER to speak regards Make It York, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am a non-executive director of Make It York, as well as being the Managing Director of LNER. I know Joan spoke to you earlier, and like Joan, I've been involved in the conversations about the arrangements between Make It York and CYC. And I have to say that these discussions have been honest and very much focused on the future and in putting in place a contract and a structure that plays to the strengths of both organisations, which I think is really important at the current time. The past year has clearly been difficult, presenting some quite incredible challenges to many people, many organisations, including Make It York and the Council. And as a board, we've certainly appreciated the support which CYC has agreed to provide to Make It York to ensure that the company remains commercially viable. But the contract is, of course, very much about the future. And it's clear to me that as a city, we face a considerable challenge to emerge from the pandemic positively, but we are actually really well positioned to do so. Make It York's a commercially structured destination management organisation, able to attract a high proportion of third-party funding in contrast to other DMOs. And it's because of that and the capability of the team that actually Make It York is regarded as one of the most capable DMOs in the country by Visit Britain and central government, which does place the city in good stead. As other speakers have referred to, York faces a really exciting future with the exciting developments that are there and coming down the pipe. And I believe it's really important that a renewed partnership is put in place between Make It York and CYC to harness the potential of these major programmes. The aims of the CYC and Make It York are entirely mutual, and both organisations must be able to complement each other in leading the recovery out of the pandemic and in delivering outcomes which are not only the best for the city, but also sustainable outcomes for the city, its residents and the businesses based here. The city is, of course, incredibly resilient, but the future will be different, and we must adapt accordingly. And this will provide a strong platform for Make It York and CYC to face the future. We must be bold, creative and innovative, and recognise that over the past 5 years, considerable effort has gone in to establish Make It York as an asset to the city. We must renew that effort because we face considerable challenges in terms of the economic climate, but also recognise where we must improve the relationship between Make It York, other partners in the city, and indeed the council itself. If you do approve the proposals, as a board, we look forward to working with you to finalise the detail of the contracts and working together with you to deliver a bright future for York. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments that will get taken into account when we consider the agenda item later tonight. We can now move on to our sixth public speaker, Gwen Swinburne, a local resident who is here to talk about agenda item 7, and you have 3 minutes.
Hang on a minute, Chair. We've had a bit of a game going on.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Sorry about that. We've been in and out like a yo-yo. Chair, members will know that the governance of our tea-car companies was brought to a national attention when we were shamefully served a rare report in the public interest. Many of its required action plans continue to be defiantly ignored to this day by each of the statutory officers, despite my incessant pleadings. We have had just one shareholder committee since 2019. So it is some relief that today one clear wrong in one tea-car company, Make It York, is being righted. This is the clear and unresolvable conflict of interest that members and officers have when they are directors of businesses that deliver services that they themselves are responsible for and commission. I am impressed with the words describing the level of CYC oversight in the governance annex for Make It York, as long as they are actualised. What I am not happy about is the piecemeal and selective approach that statutory officers are taking towards our multiple tea-car businesses, Total, Your Waste, City of York Trading, YPO, others. None of these have anywhere near the rigour as now applied to Make It York, despite the fact that most consume many more millions of our taxes than Make It York. Also, there are clear conflicts of interest at both officer and member level, particularly with Verital and Your Waste. May I also raise my deepest concerns that although these businesses are supposed to be run in a similar way to in-house units, each of them refused steadfastly to answer FOIs. There is little, if any, open data. So, Chair, we have no consistency of governance. You are not insisting on FOI obligations, salaries, or any other transparency data. You are not addressing systematically conflict-free directorships. We have no policy on officer or member directorships or any policy on director accountability to committees. I see no record retention policy. I see in this governance paper nothing about what should be published and when. The shareholder committee was supposed to bring some transparency, yet it doesn't. The meetings are infrequent at best and really close, despite Councillor Ayres' efforts. Chair, I ask the entire governance and directorship eligibility be turned over to A&G to review. In view of the importance of the shareholder committee, it is important to extend membership to 4 members, not just 2. Please consider these points, Chair, and refer them to A&G. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gwen, if you're still on, the last section of what you said didn't come across very clearly to me and to a few of us. So if acceptable, if you could send us a copy, I'll make sure it's attached to the notes of the meeting, just so that make sure everybody's got a clear record of what you said, the last 30 seconds. I did hear a yes, and then it broke up again a little bit.
I've got a yes. It's a yes.
Great, thank you very much. Your comments will get taken into account when we get on to agenda item 7. As I say, I'll make sure there's a note of the full comment with the meeting. Our 7th and final speaker today is Andrea Dudding on behalf of Unison, who is here to speak on agenda item 11, the Council's financial strategy, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Can you hear me, everybody?
Hello, we can, yes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm speaking to agenda item 11, the budget. I wrote to you on Tuesday laying out Unison's position, and as I only have 3 minutes, I'll try to cover as much as I can for the benefit of those who are listening in. Regrettably, we have a government that has a magic money tree to corruptly enrich its mates, but not the citizens it was elected to serve through local government funding. We understand that you have to make terrible choices that would negatively impact on the residents we serve. We said that we can't see any other way to make up some of the shortfall other than by raising the maximum allowable council tax, a hugely regressive tax for those on low or fixed incomes. We also said that we are sceptical of the income raising and marketisation of services. The council has a poor history of achieving income targets, and it is a fundamental principle that public services should be delivered for the public and not for private profit. Yesterday, the Chief Operating Officer wrote to all staff and said, our intention is to protect services by changing how we deliver them and to retain roles wherever possible. We hope this is not shorthand for we are going to GP as many of you as we can to drive down our costs and pass the buck on to another employer to decimate your terms and conditions and call them trusted partners. I gave you examples where Unison has had to step in to protect our members' wages, statutory annual leave entitlements, and health and safety. I said in my email that cheapy is a fig leaf you use to justify transport because it protects terms and conditions, and gave you examples of how it really doesn't do that at all. You say in paragraph 45 of agenda item 11 that you are focused on outcomes rather than just on services the council provides. As an organisation, the council has a responsibility in a citywide leadership role to ensure that the organisations they are associated with reflect best practice operationally and in employment matters. You signed up to Unison's Ethical Care Charter. It's long gone time for us to see the receipts. Councillor Aston wrote in the press how important good quality jobs are to the city. Council jobs are. Council outsourced jobs are generally not. We call on you to stop outsourcing your functions, ceding democratic oversight, transparency and control, and bring all contracts and associated workers back in-house on local government terms and conditions. I also noted that the Section 151 officer was prudent in saying that perhaps not all savings can be made and that contingency plans have to be put in place. We hope that the commitment to a CMT oversight of review and restructure plans will enable an holistic view to be taken, one that protects as many council jobs as possible. That means no outsourcing at all and impacting on important services our members provide the least. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments that will be taken into account when we consider the budget and that agenda item later in the meeting. So I'd just like to repeat once again my thanks to all of our public participants and for taking the time to speak to us this evening. That then moves us on to agenda item 4, which is the forward plan on pages 7 and 8. I'll just give any colleagues an opportunity to ask any questions, and if not, if I could see all those in favour of accepting the forward plan. So that's a clear majority in accepting that item. Thank you very much. That then moves us to agenda item 5, which is the Recovery and Renewal Strategy update from February, which starts at page 9. And I'll first hand over to Ian to present this report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This month's report is an update particularly on the Council's response to COVID. And in particular, we highlight the impact that it had on hospital admissions and discharges. We've also highlighted our response to the recent flooding events as well. In addition, the report also updates on the impact of Brexit, work relating to schools, and the ongoing processing of many millions of pounds of business grants. As members are probably aware, case numbers rose fairly dramatically in relation to COVID in January, but we have seen recently a very significant reduction in case numbers, and Sharon may wish to say a little bit more on that. The impact in terms of the case numbers going up was very significant on the hospital, and in turn that has affected the council and the work we've had to do, and particularly supporting discharges from the hospital. And there's more detail set out in the report. Just turn to flooding, and clearly, as members will be aware, high river levels do seem to be becoming a more common feature of winter, and the most recent flooding has brought further additional challenges, particularly with the need to ensure that COVID safety was observed for all of our staff, partner agencies and residents during the work that was undertaken. The Council continues to support the Vale of York CCG and primary care with the rollout of the vaccination programme. That programme is continuing to progress well, and it is expected that the target of vaccinating the first 4 groups on the priority list will be met in York by the 15th of February. Just looking ahead to a few things, clearly we recognise that there is a significant need for the Council to look ahead over the coming years, and with that in mind, the Council plan is being refreshed, and that will clearly come to the Executive in coming months, with a view to identifying any areas of new or strengthened focus. And alongside that work is underway with city partners to develop a 10-year plan to help shape the recovery and build on York's strengths. Across the council more generally, there's a lot of planning in relation to supporting communities and the economy in the coming year, and we know that that support will need to continue potentially for many years ahead. And work continues with a range of capital schemes to contribute to economic growth. And as we'll see later in the budget reports, there is provision in the budget in relation to a response to COVID. We know there will likely be significant mental health issues going forward that prevail long after the pandemic, and we are looking as a council how best we can address these with partners. And I'll just finish by again recording my thanks to all of our staff for their continued commitment to the council's work. Their well-being remains a top priority, and will continue to provide support and advice to assist our staff. But I'm very aware that these are incredibly challenging times for our staff. I'd also just finally like to record our thanks to staff in other organisations that we have worked closely with, particularly in schools, our NHS partners, universities, colleges, voluntary sector, police and fire, to just name a few of the significant organisations who we have worked with closely throughout the pandemic, and particularly in the last few weeks with our NHS colleagues. I'll stop at that point, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Ian. And I think echoing some of Ian's comments, a great deal has happened in York since our last recovery update at the January meeting of the Executive, and continued work to respond to the pandemic through the current lockdown And of course, the complication of citywide flooding and icy weather conditions has continued. And before I begin to comment on the report, I'd just like to put on record on behalf of the executive our thanks to council staff, partners, volunteers, local businesses and residents for their incredible efforts to respond to the pandemic and flooding during this difficult time. It is encouraging that the city's rate of infection continues to fall, as outlined in point 9. Since the emergence of the variant first discovered in Kent, our rates of infection increased during December, with the Kent variant now the dominant virus in the city. However, since the new year, York has responded well to reduce the spread of the virus, and as of today, our 7-day rate of new cases is below both the regional and national average. At the same time, good progress continues to be made on the vaccine rollout, of which the council is supporting the NHS, including the Vale of York CCG, in this huge logistical challenge. And as detailed in point 14, testing capacity has been increased, with additional testing now available for residents at the York Stadium Leisure Complex. It is now just over a year ago since the first cases of COVID in the UK were declared in our city. It is difficult to think of everything that has happened between then and now. But one thing that has been demonstrated throughout this period is York's resolve. As we await the government's roadmap out of lockdown, which is expected this month, we must continue to do what we can to slow the spread of the virus and alleviate pressure on our NHS. Beyond the pandemic, it is clear that serious flooding will become increasingly more frequent for us, given the impact of climate change. And whilst our frontline staff have protected the city, the emotional and financial cost of flooding to our communities who are affected by severe flooding at least once every year is undeniable. With local authorities facing major financial constraints, the government must honour its commitments to York residents by providing the necessary funding and delivering a long-term Yorkshire-wide flood plan to address flooding, including upstream measures. With that in mind, I'm happy to note the contents of the report as outlined in point 4. I'll just open now for any questions or comments from colleagues. If not, we have the recommendations in front of us on report 5. So if I could see all those colleagues in favour of accepting that. Thank you very much. That's a clear majority in favour of accepting that recommendation on report 5. That then moves us on to agenda item 6, which is City of York Trading Limited. And I know this is the point that Councillor Cuthbertson will leave the meeting with his interest, and I'll hand over to Janie and Dan to present the report. Janie.
So thank you, Chair. This evening I'm accompanied by Dan Moynihan, who is the Senior Solicitor who has worked with the Board of City of York Trading in the amendments to the Shareholders Agreement. As members are aware, the Council is the sole owner of City of York Trading Limited, and as detailed in paragraph 9 of the report, a number of events following 2018-19 have triggered the board to seek to amend the shareholders agreement to allow the board to remain quorate at its meetings and also the continued delivery of its business. Paragraph 11 of the report is detailed a summary of the changes to the shareholder agreement. These predominantly, however, relate to the minimum and maximum number of directors required on the board. We have also included a copy of the marked shareholders agreement as an appendix to this report. Whilst the shareholder committee is primarily responsible for delivering the effective governance of our sole owned companies, the constitution requires that any amendments to the shareholder agreement are brought to the executive, and that power is detailed at section 3BA, paragraph 3.2 of the terms of reference for the shareholder committee. I would just like to refer members, there is an error in the report around the recommendations which are sought this evening. So I specifically refer to page 20 of the report and under the major heading which says recommendations. There has been a typographical error in that recommendation 2, the words option 2 should not actually feature. I wanted to put recommendation 2 as a standalone recommendation to the executive this evening, as both the Section 151 officer and myself have been looking at the, in consultation with the chair of the shareholder committee, at the shareholder committee's ability to deliver effective governance and whether that remains fit for purpose. As a result, we've decided to undertake a review of the terms of reference for the shareholder committee and the associated governance arrangements which support that committee, so that we can continue to deliver effective and strong, robust governance for our tech companies. So I apologise for the typographical error, but the recommendations, just to clarify, it is absolutely correct that option 1 is detailed there as recommendation number 1, and the figure of the number 2 is correct, but the words option 2 should be deleted from that recommendation section on page 20. Happy to take any questions, Chair, and likewise Dan can also answer any technical questions on the shareholder agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I won't speak for too long on this item, as we do still have agenda items left to discuss, including, of course, the council budget. However, I do want to welcome this report and both recommendations, but in particularly the second recommendation, which is to formally note that a review of the shareholder committee and its governance arrangements is now underway. That work will culminate in an update to the constitution, which will be brought through the Audit and Governance Committee and ultimately to full council for approval. As an administration, we've made a commitment to undertake a review of the Constitution in order to ensure that the Council's governance arrangements are effective and fit for purpose. And this review will be part of that overall work. And with that, I'm very happy to suggest to colleagues that they support both recommendations 1 and 2 as outlined in the report. Are there any further questions or comments that anybody would like to make? If not, if I could see all in favour of accepting those 2 recommendations as clearly outlined by Janie. Thank you very much. That's a clear majority in favour of that. And that then takes us on to agenda item 7, which is the renewal of the council's contract with Make It York. So at this point in the meeting, councillors Craghill and Smalley will leave. Councillor Cuthbertson can come back into the meeting. Welcome everybody who's come back. So renewal of council's contract starts on page 63 and runs on till page 90. And I can see that we've been joined by Amanda, Charlie and Catherine. And I'll first hand over to Amanda.
Evening, everyone. You've got the report before you, which details the various options that are being put forward and the recommendations. I'm conscious we've got lots on the agenda tonight, so I'm not intending to go into much detail because the report is, I think, self-explanatory. Charlie may well want to add some more in introduction, but I think we'll keep it brief and open for questions.
Charlie?
No need to add anything then, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. So I'll open this item for any comments and questions and first go to Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the report, I think it would be an understatement to say the world is a dramatically different place to 2015 when the Make It York contract was set up. There were issues that I flagged up then as chair of the Economic Scrutiny Committee when it was being rushed out, but those concerns were not heeded. So we do need this opportunity to review all aspects of the contract. And whilst the pandemic has had a considerable impact on all economic activities, and Make It York is not unusual in this respect, the way in which it was established meant that it was particularly vulnerable to the loss of income from events, and in particular the Christmas market. So having personally seen the evolution of tourism leadership from the '94 tourism partnership launch, First Stop York, to the development of Visit York from the 2007 Future York report, for which there was considerable consultation, I do look forward to seeing the next phase. Following a period of review of the service level agreement, there has been the beginnings of setting out a more open, clear and performance-focused priority area as part of the new contract for 2021 to 24. But this is not finalised. It's not a done deal. And I'm grateful for those partners, businesses and individuals who have come forward already to give their opinions and views on the matters. And I look forward to seeing more engagement in consultation in the weeks ahead. Recognising the impact the pandemic has had on Make It York, the new service level agreement will address the issues of the Make It York performance, delivery, and importantly, governance arrangements, as well as commitments to review the inward investment arrangements to sharpen the city's ability to realise the opportunities to build back better and to promote York as a place to do business. We need a closer relationship between the council and Make It York. The startup helped to get Make It York established, is now in need of realignment, and we must make best use of our limited resources in the face of the challenges that we now face, notably COVID, recovery, Brexit, and the change affecting our high streets. The new contract needs to ensure that all is done to support our local economy and to build back better. The tourism industry needs support through this difficult period of time, and we need to continue to work together to enact a clear recovery plan with outcomes and the ambition to see our local and regional businesses thrive once again. It's too important to get wrong. So there will be opportunities for stakeholders and residents to share their views on any new contract in the coming weeks, and I would encourage them to get involved. Indeed, some have not needed any encouragement to come forward already. So I would urge the rest of executive to agree this report so that we can get on with making the necessary arrangements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Waller. I'm just checking to see if there are any other questions or speakers on that item. If not, we have our recommendations in front of us between pages 63 and 90. If I could see all those in favour of accepting those recommendations. So that's a clear majority in favour of accepting those recommendations. Thank you very much. That then moves us on to agenda item 8, which is a request to extend home to school transport contracts, and that's included on pages 91 to 102. And I can see that we've been joined by Sarah, and I'll first hand back to Amanda.
Again, keeping it brief, you've got a short, succinct report in front of you, which outlines two options in relation to the extension of the school transport contracts. One is a full re-procurement now, and one is an extension which gives us an option to work with the transport sector whilst the extension is in place to then look to fully re-procure the year after. I'll leave it at that. Happy to answer any questions, as is Sarah.
Thank you very much. Anything you want to add at this stage, Sarah?
No, I think the report's fairly self-explanatory. Obviously, happy to answer any questions if members have got any queries.
Thank you very much. So I'll open it to any comments or questions and first go to Councillor Orrell. You just have to come off mute.
Thank you, Chair. As Amanda's just said, the proposal in this paper to extend rather than re-tender the existing contracts this year recognises the impact COVID-19 has had on the transport industry. Extending the current contracts until 31st of August 2022 will enable some normality to return to the transport industry and allow time for costs to stabilise. These proposals are in line with those of other local authorities across the country. I've asked that the high environmental standards continue to be part of the procurement process. From my observations of school transport for Huntington School, there has been a significant improvement in this area in recent years with a replacement for the old polluting vehicles. Chair, I therefore support the recommendation 2 as detailed in the report.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Orrell. And again, just checking if there are any further questions or comments. If not, we have those recommendations as proposed in the report. Could I please see all of those in favour of accepting that? Thank you very much. That's a clear majority in favour of accepting the recommendations on agenda item 8. That then takes us through to agenda item 9, which is the start of a suite of finance related reports. The first one is the Finance and Performance Monitor, which is on pages 103 to 160, and I'll hand over to Debbie to introduce the paper.
Thank you. So this report outlines the finance and performance position as at the end of December 2020. So note that this means it may not fully reflect any potential further financial impact on income streams as a result of the current national lockdown restrictions or any additional costs that might have been incurred following the recent flooding in the city. COVID-19 clearly continues to have a major financial impact on the council, and so the report also highlights a range of budget pressures in both adults and children's social care in particular. Both the impact of COVID and the social care pressures are national issues that are being seen in most of the councils across the country and will require government intervention to fully resolve how local government is funded in future. The summary position is outlined in table 1 at paragraph 19 and shows a forecast overspend of £3.7 million. The report then goes on to outline the mitigation and other actions being undertaken to deliver this forecast, and work is continuing to try and manage the overall position through robust cost control and identification of any further mitigations. However, I think it's important just to make you aware that potentially these actions may not be able to manage the position to the point that the budget will balance overall, and that if that is the case, we will need to call on the general reserve. Clearly, we've faced an unprecedented set of circumstances over the last 12 months or so, and the reserve is held to deal with exactly this type of emergency and unexpected pressures. So in my view, using reserves to balance the current year's budget is an appropriate short-term option, especially as the financial strategy report that we'll come on to discuss later on this agenda does make provision for both COVID pressures and growth in the budget for social care. There's further detailed analysis of both finance and performance across all areas of the council included in the 2 annexes to the report, and as an executive you're asked to note the information.
Thank you very much for that, Debbie. So again, open this item for any questions or comments, and I'll first go to Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is the first of many of my regular quarterly reports from the finance portfolio. Not to dwell too long, reflecting on the sheer financial impact of COVID, with increased costs on the local authority of around £10 million, combined with a loss of income of around £8 million. And let's not forget, this is against a background of decades of pressures on local government finances, facing the brunt of austerity, always rising adult social care. The local authorities were probably in the worst place to take this kind of financial hit. As Debbie alluded to, this is not a local problem in York, this is a national problem, and just this week we heard that 4 local councils across England will be bailed out by the government. Luton, for example, to the tune of £35 million this year. We long mentioned that promise from the government that you could have everything you need to deal with the crisis didn't seem to apply. Now we know it applies to some, but definitely not, it appears, to all local authorities. I think paragraph 12 again puts us into context about where those pressures are coming from, and it is that constant growing pressure around adult social care, with increasing rise in demand set against pressures against income. We were going to go into sort of depth about what I mentioned previously, the government's failure to act on this one, though again, we've seen through leaked white papers this time that the government is perhaps finally getting around to some sort of suggestion about how they may look at reforming both health and social care. I think anybody who's read the sort of early sounds will meet that with some trepidation. Having been promised in 2012 there will be no top-down reorganisation of the NHS, it appears now we're going to get a top-down reorganisation of both the NHS and health and social care. So some trepidation about what that means, though obviously some opportunity if we can lobby government strongly to really start to address that financial pressure around that area. Reflecting on the second half of the portfolio, a few comments I wanted to make around performance. Clearly, COVID has had an issue on some of those performance statistics. Footfall in our city centre is down. Vacancy rates in some of our commercial properties owned by the private sector continues to be down, but I would reflect that CYC ownership properties do remain well let, and room occupancy, etc. Those touring-based businesses are struggling still, but we are still delivering strong performance. So affordable home delivery this year, more than double what it was last year. Our customer centre continues against a very difficult backdrop to achieve 92% of its targets. Libraries, while they are down as would be expected in terms of footfall, I think have really delivered particularly strong levels of footfall through those libraries during the periods they were able to be opened, which demonstrates the confidence people have in what the council and what Explore have been doing. And I did particularly want to pick up around the ebook story that I did notice that increase from I think 11,000 last year to nearly 100,000 ebooks rented this year really does show a way that the library service has been able to adapt and really to help people in terms of these difficult periods. And the final one I wanted to flag was in terms of how we're coming back and bouncing back with recovery. So I think as you look at page 112, we will notice that business startup levels in the city at this time are around about the same as they were a year ago. So it is still a city that people want to move to, want to invest in, and want to do business in. I think it's really important we remember that. So with that, Chair, happy to support the recommendations at paragraph 10 on page 105.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Eyre. Just again to check if there are any further comments or questions. If not, we have that proposal from Councillor Eyre. So if I could please see all those in favour of accepting those recommendations. Thank you very much. So that's a clear majority in favour of accepting those recommendations. We now move on to agenda item 10, which is the Capital Programme Monitor 3 on pages 161 to 184 of your agenda packs, and I'll hand back over to Debbie.
Thank you. This report sets out progress in delivering the capital programme during the current financial year. There are no major issues, I don't think, to draw to your attention, other than to say that there continues to be a significant level of investment in a range of schemes, and some key areas of progress are listed at paragraph 3 in the report. There is some movement between years of the 5-year programme to note, and members are also asked to approve the school's capital schemes that are actually outlined in paragraph 15, actually, not paragraph 18 as said.
Thank you very much for that. And again, open it to comments and questions and go to Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I think, as I mentioned previously, this has always been an ambitious capital programme. It was an ambitious capital programme originally around driving economic growth and bringing the city forward. That put us into such a strong position when it came to recovery and how we start to build back out of this recovery. Looking at the financial year that we're in, we will have delivered nearly £120 million of that capital programme. So, as Debbie alluded to with some slippage, that's a major achievement. I wanted to pick on a few of those. In terms of schools, we've seen major expansion of Archbishop Holgate's, significant increased capacity there, but even smaller scale things that have been equally as vital, such as the work at Westfield Primary. And I know in particular, having been spoken to Councillor Fenton at the time, Dringhouses Primary, essential getting that capital work done to make sure the out of school club could continue during that difficult period that we were in. Delivering on climate change, the Hyperhubs project that's going on, so the next generation of charging infrastructure, I think that's something that a lot of people will be surprised by. As a recent exponent of hybrid cars, I'm getting more and more used to how these things work, and it's been a changing scene for me, but these really are the next generation, will take us to a landmark facility in terms of this rapid charging, which though many people won't experience, it's much more like visiting a petrol station. So the traditional hubs where you leave your car there for 5.5 hours, this is more about actually filling up in many ways as you would in terms of a petrol station. And say that's likely to be up and running around about April, and the Poppleton one coming on stream in June after that one. The Outer Ring Road, something we've probably been looking at for the best part of several decades. We continue to progress that. Public consultation has been done. Public consultation has gone well. We look forward to the reports coming back on that one and looking to move that forward to the next stages. Castle Gateway, again, another significant project for the area, something that stalled for many, many years. We've managed to get significant amounts of permissions through planning to all of those simple projects. It's really, as I walked down there today, actually, as part of my daily exercise, to kind of have a look and reflect on what the area is like. And you really can see now that the major transformation that's happened to that area in the last 5 or 6 years. And it really does look, you can see that the CYC land that is in there is that final piece in the jigsaw that really will transform that to the world-class gateway to the city that we envisaged, rather than what was previously a very forgotten piece of the city centre. York Central, we have to reflect, work is happening at York Central. Something, again, of many projects people said would never happen. We do now have work on site, and progressing this through into the new year, we'll start to see significant work in terms of delivering the infrastructure project. The little known one I wanted to flag, which is one of the most important reasons we're here right now at this very moment, is ICT. A lot of the investment we've done in there. That's not just about the hardware that we're using. Again, I've learned over the last couple of years massive amounts about software and infrastructure and the significant costs of those, but that's the very sort of backbone. In the same way, the York Central needs that infrastructure to unlock it. So our IT systems and our capabilities need exactly the same, be that contact management or things like Zoom as we're using now. And I can't leave without reflecting on the completion of the community stadium, which I think will probably come as no surprise to anyone, and really reflect on with the completion of that project, what we've actually been able to achieve. Far too much focus on the negative over the past. So I just wanted to take time to really reflect on what we've delivered, not just for the city, but for the region. It's a truly unique partnership that we've engaged on with the NHS. I don't think there is anywhere else in the country, perhaps even in Europe, that have taken that approach of integrating a local authority, the NHS, leisure services, the sports facilities. It really is absolutely unique and will be a fantastic asset to the city. Similarly, that integration of leisure, that sort of amateur level of sport with professional level of support, game changing. The work we've done with community partners, be that Explore, York Against Cancer, Little Gym, all of these working under the same roof. The one that people often forget, the regional standards athletics track delivered out at York University, publicly available. As someone who actually, now I come to remember, used to sweep the athletics track at Rydal Stadium as one of my first jobs, to see that transformation from what we have now, which is generally county standard athletics track, is absolutely unbelievable. Out on Haxby Road, next to the new hospital that's been delivered, absolutely outstanding training facilities for York City Knights delivered as part of this project, something that has allowed them to be in a position where they can bid and get close to achieving Super League status. I think that's something we really shouldn't forget. And on top of that is the outstanding commercial offer that is there and people will be able to enjoy when we come back out of lockdown. So I think with that, Chair, again, happy to support the recommendations on page 162, paragraph 4.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Eyre. And again, as previously, just to check with any colleagues, any questions or comments. If not, we have the recommendations in front of us for agenda item 10. And if I could please see those in favour of accepting them. Thank you very much. That's a clear favour of accepting the recommendations on agenda item 10. That then moves us on to agenda item 11, which is the financial strategy 21-22 to 25-26, which is on pages 185 to 326. And I'll first go to Debbie to present the report.
Thank you. So this report sets out the revenue budget proposals for the next financial year, and subject to your agreement tonight, will be referred on to full council later this month for final approval. I would just point out there's a small error actually in paragraph 105 of the report, where the figure for retained business rates should reach 33.341 million, a decrease of 74,000. Apologies for that. The correct figure is used in the recommendations paragraph. So the key issues of the financial strategy are the proposed council tax increase of 1.99%, plus using the government's adult social care precept of 3%. Whilst this is the maximum increase allowed, I understand the majority of other unitary councils are actually proposing the maximum increase as well. The savings of 7.9 million are outlined in Annex 2. These include a number of proposals, including reduction in sort of back office costs by some 3 million. There are also significant proposals in adults and children's social care. However, there is additional growth in the budget as well, so that the overall impact will be an increase in the budget for these sort of crucial statutory services. The proposals also fully protect the public health budget, with proposed savings being matched by additional growth. In relation to some of the comments made by the public speaker from Unison at the start of the meeting, I would just add that the particular saving that talks about or refers to opportunities in the independent sector is very much an exploration of the options at this stage, that exploration of the options will include delivery models with partners outside of the council. But until that initial phase is completed, there's no fixed view at this stage as to the best delivery model going forward. And then I guess I would say, as outlined in all the financial reports really on the agenda tonight, the impact of COVID has been significant and the future remains uncertain. So it might be a crucial element of the financial strategy is that inclusion of a £2.5 million COVID contingency/recovery fund, because that allows the planning of the various measures to accelerate recovery that are listed in paragraph 73, alongside leaving a prudent amount really to deal with any future further impact where the council might need to react quickly to local circumstances. The budget allows for continued investment in waste and other frontline services and the continuation of the work on the climate change delivery programme. We've undertaken consultation with residents and businesses, and the results of this are included at Annex 4 to the report. In terms of the medium-term financial picture, again, I would just highlight that there remains a great deal of uncertainty, both in light of the ongoing impact of the pandemic, but also a number of key reforms have been delayed yet again, such as the Fair Funding Review, business rate retention. I think we mention these every year as part of the budget that they're coming, and every year they've been delayed another year. And in addition, the 2020 spending review should have been a multi-year settlement, but again, due to COVID, was only a one-year settlement. So all that uncertainty adds to the financial challenge ahead. But the report does include a high-level summary of the medium-term financial forecast at paragraph 130. The other annexes to the report include the better decision-making tool at Annex 9 and specific budget risk assessment at Annex 10 that outline some of the key issues and risks to be considered. I would also remind all members of your responsibility to consider the public sector equality duty as set out at paragraph 173 of the report, and the support and equalities impact assessment analysis as part of your decision-making considerations for this particular item. And then finally, the report also includes a statement from me as the Section 151 officer on the robustness of the budget proposals. And so my view of the budget is that whilst it is challenging and will require careful monitoring throughout the year, particularly in respect of the achievement of proposed savings, I do feel it is prudent and it does include a provision for all known pressures. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Debbie. I know that some of my colleagues will want to highlight aspects of the budget that relate to their own portfolio areas, and I'm sure everyone here will also be pleased to know that there'll be another opportunity to fully discuss the budget at full council should we vote it through to go to full council tonight later this month. I think it's fair to say that the last 12 months have been an incredibly difficult period for the council, and like many other local authorities up and down the country, we're facing, as you've just heard, unprecedented financial pressures following years of government cuts and the emerging economic impact of the pandemic. To summarise, this year we are facing difficult choices that we would rather not make. Demand for council services has increased, and at the same time our income has significantly fallen. Despite some additional funding from the government, which is welcome, we face an in-year financial pressure totalling 15 million, as detailed in point 20 of the report. Since the pandemic began, the council has stepped up to support local communities by focusing resource and investing in measures to build back better, from establishing our community hub network to processing over 100 million of financial support to local businesses. A great deal has been done that the council can be proud of to support the city during this difficult time. In response to the council's financial situation, the Chancellor announced a supposed increase in spending power. However, on analysis of the detail, this is not new funding, but is instead funded by council's powers to raise money through council tax and the adult social care precept. The risk, as always, is left to local government. Recognising the current challenges the city faces, we are proposing to increase total spending by 2.6 million on adult social care and support for children and young people, whilst investing additional resources to protect frontline services and accelerate economic recovery. To achieve this, we must stabilise the Council's own financial position so that it can continue to provide those crucial services to our local communities, services which have been so relied upon. That is why a number of back office efficiencies and savings are being proposed, enabling an increase in these priority areas. With the ever evolving situation regarding the pandemic, we are proposing to create a 3.5 million COVID recovery fund for the city as part of the budget. This includes, for example, £150,000 to support carers and those struggling with their mental health, £80,000 to provide businesses with more support, £40,000 to help get people back onto public transport, and other schemes. The impact of the pandemic is becoming clearer every day, and we, like local businesses, will still have to grapple with increased financial risks and pressures moving forward. This budget proposes a way to stabilise the Council's financial position, which in turn will help us to invest in and maintain crucial services to support our local communities and businesses, as well as accelerating that recovery over coming years. I propose that we support the recommendations as outlined in points 10 to 14. And on that, I will go to Councillor Orrell.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to children's services, like councils across the country, we are seeing significant demand pressures in children's services, impacting on our budget. Demand is increasing and numbers of children in our care are also rising. There are well-publicised issues with special educational needs and disabilities and high needs funding, which are subject to a long-awaited national review by government. Whilst we continue to wait for the government to act and deliver the reform that these services need, I'm pleased to see the proposed budget continues to support the continual improvement in our services. This improvement has been led by a review of local service delivery, attempting to support children and help families at the earliest opportunity on the basis that early intervention leads to better outcomes for children. The additional investment in the budget for the coming years will support current pressures, delivering services for the most vulnerable children, young people and families, and I therefore support this aspect of the budget, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Orrell. Councillor de Gorme.
Thank you, Chair. It's very important to acknowledge the vital role that the Council has had in supporting the city, its residents and businesses through the last 12 months and recognise the impact this has unavoidably had on Council's finances. Since the very beginning, nearly a year ago, of this pandemic, Council officers and members have worked around the clock to provide critical support to those who need it most. Now we have to face these difficult financial challenges so we can continue York's efforts to build back better and continue to deliver the essential services to our local communities. Despite the huge financial challenge we face, this year's budget proposals continue our drive to tackle climate change, to maintain the city's road network despite the weather, and to work on developing our sustainable travel infrastructure through our active travel programme and enhancements whenever we upgrade junctions and traffic signals. As detailed in point 73, I certainly welcome the proposed investment to build confidence back in our public transport, an essential service that's been maintained for key workers despite the pandemic. It is a crucial aspect to build back better and lock in some of the changed lifestyles that we've seen over the last 12 months, with more people taking part in active travel. I also welcome the further £60,000 to support the temporary foot street solution for Fossgate, which I know many local businesses have really valued during those months when the economy was open, as well as those who have welcomed the additional space for social distance achieved through the foot street extensions around the city centre. Lastly, I would like to highlight and welcome the proposed £200,000 to create a new local transport plan, updating the current policy which dates from 2011. Once developed, this plan will become a key part of our approach to tackling the climate emergency and ensure a fit-for-purpose transport network for the city. So it's incredibly important that this funding is there to engage everyone in that task. So I'm happy to support the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor de Gaunt. Councillor Runciman.
Thank you, Chair. The national crisis in adult social care continues to worsen. And despite the tremendous efforts by the adult social care teams in the council and by the public health team in the council, we still have greater demands on the money that we have in the City of York. And those demands will continue to increase. This creates cost pressures for York's adult social care services, just as it does for every council up and down the country. For many years, I've been waiting for the government to deliver meaningful reform to social care funding. And there's been a lot of announcements today that seem to indicate that might happen. But when I read them and when I see comments of my adult social care colleagues, what I see is it's mainly top governance changes and not what is actually happening on the ground, which is us as a council working very closely with our NH partners. And I'm grateful to the NHS and all aspects of the health service for working so closely with us to tackle all the problems that we've had. The councils need to be an equal partner in the redesign of any national oversight, building on sector-led improvement work and giving a voice to people who use and work in social care. But I don't think the white paper, that, as I've heard it so far, puts social care on a sustainable long-term footing. It's good that the council can step up where the government fails. We are investing in adult social care, as my colleagues say, supporting adult social care staff, supporting public health teams, and enabling our residents to remain in their homes for longer. We are already reviewing the key areas of budget pressure, and we hope to improve the budget position, as well as creating enhanced social care leadership and management structure that will enable us to manage the budget sustainably. And there's a lot of work underway with our health colleagues to make sure we've got effective joint care pathways, commissioning and brokerage in place. I'm particularly delighted to see in paragraph 73 the investment in lower level mental health service, as I, like many others, can see a mental health problem exploding as the pandemic goes on and as lockdown is lifted. And we need to be there to help our residents, with the help of our voluntary sector, to get through what has been a very difficult time for everybody. So I'm really pleased to recommend to everyone to support the recommendations in this report.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Runciman. Councillor Mize.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions, but I'll just follow on from what Councillor Runciman's just said and agreeing with what she's saying about adult social care and the budget pressures that there are in those key council directorates, and you know, referring back to the papers around the recovery fund, it is wise to see £1 million for each adult social care and children's social care directorates. But in reality, that is because we always face the budget pressures mid-year, where both directorates are severely or largely overspent. And then, so, you know, it's prudent to put that away, but it is absolutely necessary. That's the point I'm trying to make there. The question I've got really is one for officers and one for the executive, really. I've got a particular issue around PEO 11, which has been mentioned by the public speaker and also by Debbie. I'm trying to work out in that budget line exploring opportunities to partner with the independent sector. What is referred to by the lower unit costs? What are the lower unit costs in partnering with the independent sector? And then the question for the executive chair, if I may, is to just ask you about the number of jobs at risk and if you're aware of the number of jobs at risk, and if you're aware of the number of jobs at risk of TUPE, and if you're aware of which directorates they are within. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Myers. I can hopefully bring Amanda Hatton back to the table at this moment. I'll first hand over to Debbie, and also obviously Ian is here, and Amanda. I don't know if between the three of you could pick up both of Danny's questions, and then obviously any colleagues are welcome to come in. Who would like to go first? Amanda, you were off mute, so I was going to go to you.
I'm having problems going on and off mute, but I'm happy to go first. I think Debbie outlined this in her introduction to the paper, and I think Councillor Myers, we have sent you a detailed briefing note on this. So if the detail that you need in there isn't in there, I'm happy to have a further conversation with you offline. It is very much looking at all our options in terms of, looking at the options for delivery. We've got to make sure we get best value for our most vulnerable residents, and we get the best quality care that we can do in the kind of finite resources we've got, in a context where, as we've outlined, there is rising demand. So we do need to look at, what we can deliver and what we can deliver best in partnership with our colleagues who are in the independent sector and in all the other sectors that deliver care. So there isn't a decision made in terms of what the detail of that proposal looks like. It is about exploring the various options based on the different market rates that are available in different aspects of the provision that's out there.
Thank you. Debbie, if I go to you next.
Yeah, and sorry, what was the second part of your question, Councillor Myers? Was it about number of posts impacted? Sorry.
Well, it is really, and I'd be happy to if you could answer that, but really it was directed at the decision makers, if you like, because I'm trying to understand, as they are the decision makers, if they have been made aware of that detail, which I think is incredibly important. I can remind you of the question, though. It's the job losses by directorate, the number of jobs at risk of TUPE, and the overall figure of job losses.
So if I can just answer, first of all, that as part of the discussion of the proposals, then there was an indication in the original working papers, if you like, about the number of jobs that could potentially be impacted. But with the majority of the proposals, they are like the PEO 11 one that we've just been talking about. They are about an exploration of potential opportunities. So we don't have that level of detail as yet, because until the budget is approved and then officers then begin to look at the different options, and obviously until we start talking to the staff, then clearly staff consultation could identify alternative ways in which some of those savings could be made, and that's a process, that a HR process and change process that we would go through. So I think from an officer perspective anyway, we don't have that level of detail, because it will depend on the outcome of the consultation with unions and staff members when we get into the detailed business plan and kind of delivery of the savings once they're approved.
And Ian, is there anything you wanted to
I think the only thing I would add, I think for the organisation, I think it's partly been said already, these are challenging financial times, and there are some difficult choices that the council will have to make. I think in terms of staff, we have committed, to at all times to try and seek to minimise any compulsory redundancies. We have got some controls in terms of recruitment now, which is seeking to try and avoid situations where we bring people in to then only get rid of other people in 3 months' time. And clearly, there are vacant posts, and we will, as we've always done, seek to work through our HR procedures, but to try and, minimise compulsory redundancies wherever we can do.
Thank you. Ian, Councillor Eyre, you wanted to come back as well?
I think Ian covered most of the bits I was going to pick up, but I just wanted to make that sort of broader point to Councillor Myers that it is a matter of balancing. So there are 3 things a local authority can do to balance. That is to raise income, which we are doing, and as you're aware of, there are limited options in terms of doing that. And there are delivering efficiencies, and there are reducing services. So I think any of those, if you stop doing one, then you lead to doing other ones. So taking the TUPE conversation, for example, maintaining those levels without TUPEing would have an impact across, which would either mean service reduction or other efficiencies or other reductions in other areas of the council. So it's not simply a case of saying X, Y, and Z. You do have to balance those across. And it often is a choice between holding vacancies or reducing the level of service. For every cost you incur, there is a saving required elsewhere. So I think it is a complicated balancing process, and that's why you can't at this stage say here is a black and white figure. So I think it is something that needs to be explored throughout that process, and you'll have a broad indication, but those final figures won't come until much later.
Thank you. Councillor Myers, do you want to come back?
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. I just wanted to get it clear, and I appreciate the answers. But for me, it's a fundamental question around the decision maker and this body yourselves. For me to try to understand if you've been made aware of the impacts of the decision you take tonight on the workforce, and I understand it's not a black and white number that you can get, but surely you're able to get a range for the options that are detailed within the papers that you're going to vote through. And so, yes, of course, consultation has to happen after, and the HR processes do need to be adhered to properly. And that needs to happen after the budget's gone through. But surely you're aware of the risks at the lower level and then the higher level to both job losses and outsourcing within each of your own directorates. I just want to understand that you have been given that detail, or haven't you, and you're voting on it tonight.
Thank you very much. I thought Debbie answered that, but I'll go back to Councillor Eyre first, and then I'll go back to Debbie just in case. Councillor Eyre.
I was going to say something similar, and yes, exec members are aware, and there are time and places for certain conversations. I certainly would not think it would be responsible as an organisation for any member of council or officer to sit here and say, this is X number in this directorate, this is X number in this directorate. That is not what staff want, and that is not the way we should be engaging with staff. So I think, yes, absolutely, everybody is well aware of what impact, and as Ian alluded to, minimising that impact as much as possible. And for some, that might mean moving across directorates. So it's not always the case that a reduction in one directorate is a reduction in staff. It could be someone being redeployed elsewhere. So yes, we are fully aware, but there are certain sensitivities that we have to work within.
Debbie, I don't know if you want to come back at all, or
no. I think Nigel covered it. I would just, I guess, point out the obvious that for an organisation of this size to save £7.9 million and assume there will be impact on all services and all aspects of council services. I would think that would be fair to say. So I can't imagine there will be any council service that won't be impacted by savings of this magnitude in one way or another.
Thank you, Debbie. And I think that where we will agree, Councillor Myers, is that point earlier in the meeting, how three councils have been bailed out, others are not, despite the government promising back in March that they wouldn't allow some of those unprecedented challenges to build up. And it's certainly a case that I know all councils will keep making loud and clear. I cannot see any other questions or hands. So we've got the recommendations in front of us on agenda item 11. So could I please see those in favour of accepting? Thank you very much. That's a clear majority in favour of accepting those recommendations on agenda item 11, which will be debated at full council. We can now move on to agenda item 12. Now, I did say at this point to colleagues that I'd have a look at the time and see if we needed a break. I can see Councillor Widdowson clearly indicating, and Councillor Eyre, that we shouldn't. I'm quite happy to not take a break. It was just to give anybody an opportunity to jump up and down and demand a break at this moment, but I shall take the carry on as your indication. So we now, as I say, go on to agenda item 12, which is the capital budget 21-22 to 25-26, which is set out on pages 327 to 362. And back over to Debbie.
Thank you. So this report outlines the capital programme for the next 5 years, with a particular focus on next financial year. As clearly council capital investment funded by borrowing has a revenue impact, I'm mindful of the council's financial position. There has been a review of the levels of capital investment needed, and this has allowed some reprioritisation that's outlined in the report that enables the continuation of investment in the council priorities that continue to drive regeneration and accelerate the city's economic recovery, and also tries to maximise the use of any external funding that might be available. In total, 41 million will be added to the 5-year programme, and the report outlines both the reprioritisation and the new schemes, and an update on existing schemes is all outlined in the detail of the report. So I'll leave it at that. Okay, thank you, Keith.
Thank you very much, Debbie. And again, I'll open it to any colleagues for comments or questions. I'll first go to Councillor Eyre.
I told you to carry on, Chair. I should tell you now, I've got about an hour and a half to cover. I shall try to be brief. As I mentioned previously, it's an ambitious capital programme previously, and while being prudent in terms of reviewing what we're doing, we'll continue to be ambitious and continue to focus on recovery. Hence why we put some in there, an allowance in there for COVID response, as we did with the revenue budget, to make sure that we're in the best place possible to fight back better from this particular issue. Highlighting some key aspects of it, I think the fleet investment is something massively significant. So we did declare a climate emergency. We are acting on that. We do have a goal to go full electric by 2030. This is the first step in that process. We continue to extend some of our rolling programmes, which don't necessarily get some of the coverage that they always should do, adding to our highways investment. So we added £1 million to highways in 2019. We added a further almost £13 million in 2021. This adds another £5 million into that area. It's key to see that we've been able to secure around about £7 million of government investment into the highways, which has then allowed us to reprioritise some of the areas within that, which allows us to do the £3 million worth of flood works that we're looking at doing, and also further investment in bridge maintenance and highways work. I think some of the things get lost because it's about what we will deliver in the next year, and some of that has already been in the capital programme and isn't a new announcement. But to remember what will actually be on site and what will be happening as we go into 21-22. Already alluded to York Central, £77 million is in place. The early works are on. We'll expect to start to see that infrastructure work really escalating through 21-22. We're sat here remotely. I'm not sure when we'll be back in terms of face-to-face meetings, but hopefully by that point, the Guildhall will have been completed. We're expecting that completed in 21-22. So every chance that when we do come out of lockdown, we will be able to go back to using the council chamber. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the approvals are in place for Castle Gateway. That delivers significant amount of housing, really starts to regenerate that particular part of the city. And finally, we did get the approval through for the York Station frontage. So we really start to get to see something, a really world-class destination venues to the city, as well as everything else. So I think I look at it, I think this really could be a landmark year for the city with some of the key major pieces of capital projects that we've all been looking to deliver for decades, finally starting to take shape on site and some to conclusion. With that, Chair, happy to approve the recommendations on page 329, paragraph 7.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Smalley.
Thank you, Chair. And I won't take too long to speak, but I just wanted to ensure that the continued investment in our city's libraries doesn't go unnoticed this evening. My colleagues have already spoken about the extreme financial pressures facing the council, but I, for one, am very grateful to see the administration's commitment to protecting and innovating library services in York. We have all seen how vital library services have been for our communities throughout the last year. They've been a lifeline for many residents at this time. Whether it's reading a good book or exploring the many resources Explore has to offer, it's providing a vital service now more than ever, particularly for those residents living on their own. Up and down the country, we've seen how community and particularly library services cut and closed, and I'm very glad that here today we're not seeing those such proposals put forward in this budget, and instead there is a major investment in maintaining and creating new libraries, which is still a core commitment. I'm glad to see that these proposals continue this investment, particularly the work to provide the new permanent library for the residents of Haxby and Wigginton, as well as delivering upgraded libraries in Acomb and Clifton. The work on these schemes has been progressing at pace over the last few months, and I'd like to thank staff at Explore as well as council officers who have been working on these schemes whilst also working on the response to COVID-19. We've been clear from the very start of this administration, our libraries play a key role in supporting local communities, and the continuation of this vital capital investment will secure their future and innovation as focal points for communities across York. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Craghill.
Thank you, Chair. Particularly given the serious economic impacts of the pandemic and the financial pressures on the council we've just been hearing about, I do very much welcome this capital programme, which still takes forward £600 million of investment in creating new jobs, new and better homes, and new high quality public spaces, all of which will support our residents, businesses and communities into the future. It's really crucial that we retain this capacity in our capital programme to enable us to build back better, not only following the pandemic, but also in the context of other challenges such as Brexit and our climate change ambitions. For my own portfolio area, I think it's worth noting that this capital budget continues our investment in the fabric of our council homes, including home improvements and modernisation works to the value of £10 million for the coming year. In addition, the programme includes £2 million to kickstart energy efficiency work on our council housing stock, reducing carbon emissions whilst improving comfort and reducing energy bills for our residents, as well as £640,000 for adaptations to properties to support residents with a disability so they can continue to remain in their own homes. The capital funding that's committed to completing the introduction of new ICT systems is also very important and welcome. The new system will enable staff in all areas to respond more quickly and efficiently to residents' queries, for example, by enabling residents to easily track the progress of repairs and maintenance requests. It will form a key part of our overall approach to further improving our landlord services over the coming year. Finally, I would like to highlight that we are maintaining investment in the housing delivery programme so the council can continue to deliver new homes on council-owned sites. Points 68 to 71 in the paper details some of the progress already being made. Design work on the next 3 sites is progressing well, and planning applications for Duncan Barracks and Burnholme will soon be going to committee. These sites will deliver the next 118 homes in the programme, and these homes will be passive house and zero carbon in use, whilst 40% will be affordable. And design and engagement work on further sites is also set to begin in the coming months. So with all that in mind, I'm very happy to support the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Craghill. And then I'll go to Councillor Widdowson.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm going to try and not speak for long and leave my further comments to our first virtual Budget Council. However, I'd like to very briefly note how delighted I am to see these proposals set out, which will continue to aid us in our work to make York cleaner and greener and reduce carbon emissions across the city. Despite the major financial pressures facing the Council, which have been set out by my colleagues throughout this evening, I'm happy to see us continue to lead and invest in projects and schemes which will deliver tangible and long-term improvements for generations to come. Here I'd like to specifically note the proposal set out in this paper for a capital investment of over £5 million to develop new initiatives to reduce carbon emissions. This includes £5 million to support the Council's vehicle and infrastructure policy to deliver as many electric vehicles as possible, a further £250,000 for carbon reduction schemes to fit carbon reduction technology on council assets, and our ongoing investment in our ambitious ambitious zero carbon housing delivery programme. Finally, I'd also like to note the substantial investment proposed to deliver the long-awaited joined-up flood alleviation scheme in Fulford, which will protect residents and properties from what are now ever more frequent flooding events.
Thank you very much, Councillor Widdowson. I cannot see any other hands to speak. So we have the recommendations as originally moved by Councillor Eyre in front of us for the capital budget, agenda item 12. Could I please see all those in favour of accepting those recommendations? Thank you very much. That's a clear majority in favour of accepting those recommendations. That then takes us to agenda item 13, which is the capital financing and investment strategy. And I'll go back to Debbie to present this report.
So this is a regular standard report as part of the suite of budget reports. That's a requirement of the Prudential Code. There've been no significant changes really from the previous year. It just sets out the approach and the risk appetite in regards to the funding of capital programme and capital investment. So there is a addition in the actual strategy itself just to reflect the impact of COVID and how that means it's more important than ever to fully appreciate and analyse the risk and have a proper methodology. But other than that, there are no significant changes to note.
Thank you very much for that, Debbie. I'll invite any comments or questions and go to Councillor Eyre.
Glad to know very little to add, Chair. I think it's just the roots upon which the capital programme grows. So I think just happy to move the recommendations on page 363, paragraph 2.
Thank you very much. I can't see any other indication. So if I could please see those in favour of accepting those recommendations. Thank you very much. So it's a clear majority in favour of accepting the recommendations on agenda item 13. That then takes us to agenda item 14, which is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement. It starts at page 373, and I'll ask Debbie to introduce it.
Thank you. This is another statutory report that's required by the Prudential Code. Again, there are no significant changes to the strategy itself to bring to your attention, and the report and the strategy has been considered by Audit and Governance Committee in their scrutiny role, and any comments that they made have been incorporated into the strategy.
Thank you very much for that. And again, I'll first go to Councillor Eyre.
Again, Chair, this is one of those statutory reports. It's been through Audit and Governance. I think happy to support the recommendations as they're written on page 373, paragraph 2.
Thank you very much for that. And I'll just check there aren't any questions or comments from colleagues. If not, if I could please see those in favour of those recommendations. Thank you very much. That's clear. A majority in favour of the recommendations on report 14. That then takes us to agenda item 15, which is urgent business. I am not aware of any urgent business, so hopefully that means we don't have any. Just to thank everybody from the public participants to councillors and officers for taking part in the executive meeting tonight. And as we said, budget, revenue and capital will now go on to our first virtual budget full council for further debate later in the month. Thank you all. Bye-bye.